the security at what?
Jacob, followed by Nerima, political violence. Cornelius kuja hapa. You are number 4. We are sitting according to the reading. Hapa. Mimi kwanza, preamble, Jacob, number 2, Nerima, Cornelius, Wariga on housing and land, Catherine on freedoms, Sheila on public, on corruption, Kawive on
So we start?
yes.
Okay, so good afternoon, members of the press. We've convened you as civil society organizations, coalitions, and networks that have an interest in promoting human rights and democratic governance in Kenya. So we are here to issue our statement on the state of the nation, and the statement is basically condensation of issues which various coalitions that are represented here have consolidated, reflected over, and therefore we present this as what we consider as the key issues facing our country, and we also giving recommendations on what needs to be done. We have Malombe, Davis Malombe of Kenya Human Rights Commission, who will read part of the statement, and will invite other members of the civil society also to read sections that relate to what they do. And thereon, after that, we shall invite you to make questions and ask anything. Thank you. Over to you, Malombe.
Thank you. Good afternoon, members of the media. First is to apologize for the delays in starting our press conference. I wish to welcome you to this event, which is coming basically 6 months after the political year of the regime in power. Remember, this government was sworn in on 13th of September 2022, and therefore, if you count from that time to now, we are talking about 2.5 years down the line. Every year, which is September, we normally issue a State of Nation report as civil society. So far we have done 2 in September 2023 and September 2024. So today, we are issuing a mid-term report for September last year to up to where we are right now. So we are talking about 6 months. And in September this year, we'll be talking about 3 years. So we'll be issuing a comprehensive media report for the last 3 years since this regime has been in power. So we are talking about a mid-term report card. So in September, we'll be giving you a detailed report for the year and for the last 3 years. So our statement is titled Kenya Slides into Depression. So this year, which means now the political year we are talking about from September, but this happened sometime last year. Civicus downgraded Kenya's civic space from obstructed to repressed. This followed the rampant human rights violations and also other abuses in the country. Our country is basically breeding, as you see in the evidence we are giving. Kenyans are dying in hospitals due to the collapse of the healthcare services. and also the effects of the social health authorities come, among others. In public universities, students are suffering under a deliberately broken funding model. Schools are facing serious crises in terms of capitation, among other problems we'll be talking about. At the international level, we are facing a crisis of diplomatic standing. Our image across Africa and globally is stained. The William Ruto regime and its destructive policies drive our nation into a state of despair. Actually, we are calling it a state of human rights and governance crisis. According to InfoTrack, 83% of Kenyans believe the country is headed in the wrong direction, with 69% directly blaming one Mr. William Samoei Ruto. As of December last year, this approval rating had plummeted to just 19%. Since this year, the situation has only worsened. The regime has intensified its crackdown on dissent, even targeting school children for performing a play that challenged the state on accountability and governance. And you know this story about Muthere girls. So from here, I'm inviting colleagues to speak about different issues we are concerned about as we talk about the state of nation. Jacob?
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Jacob Atiang. I'm going to read this statement on behalf of the Police Reforms Working Group Kenya, and specifically around security excesses. Between January and September 2023, Independent Medical Legal Unit documented 228 cases of police torture, 67 cases of extrajudicial killings, and 1 case of enforced disappearance. According to the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights, police killed 63 people and injured 610 others during the Gen Z protest between June and November 2024. And I want to say that the late chair of Kenya National Commission on Human Rights, this was one of her last statements before she departed. That Kenya National Commission on Human Rights also reported that 1,367 protesters were brutally arrested and 74 individuals forcefully disappeared. As of today, 26 people who disappeared are still missing, and the culprits are yet to be held to account. However, data from Human Rights Watch, Kenya Human Rights Commission, and IMLU shows the number of those killed, disappeared, and arbitrarily arrested could be higher than we have stated. For instance, IMLU report shows 89 cases of enforced disappearances during this period. We are still conducting more research into these cases. So there are mixed data in terms of our results there. The units responsible for those atrocities, according to Human Rights Watch, were allegedly drawn from the Directorate of Criminal Investigation, that is DCI, supported by Rapid Deployment Unit under the Administration Police Service, APS, Military Intelligence, the Anti-Terror Police Unit, and the National Intelligence Service. In December 2024, police arrested 10 protesters during the anti-femicide march, and many others were subjected to excessive force, resulting into unwarranted injuries and further undermining the rights of peaceful assemblies. And you remember this happened at the heart of the city in Nairobi. December 2024 marked a chilling escalation of state repression across Kenya. From the cancellation of Mathare Reggae Festival due to police intimidation, targeted tear gas attacks on opposition figures, and the abduction of citizens over generated statistical images of President Ruto, the regime intensified its crackdown on dissidents. Peaceful protesters were met with arbitrary arrest and legal harassment. At the same time, even sacred spaces like churches were not spared. Police stormed a Nyandarua church and tear-gassed worshippers on the New Year Eve, that was 2024. Cross-border violations have also increased. Kenya is becoming a hub of politically motivated abductions of foreigners, including Tanzanian activist Maria Sarungi, a Ugandan opposition leader Kizza Besigye, and others from South Sudan, Ethiopia, Turkey, and Uganda. 36 Ugandans were abducted in Kisumu alone, and that happened a while ago. And you are aware that this was a case that really was disturbing across the region. The recent injury and intimidation of journalists reporting on the incident of the National Drama Festival in Nakuru recently further exposes a growing culture of state repression that must be urgently addressed. Accordingly, the tear gassing of students from Butere Girls High School by police is a stark reminder of long-standing and deeply troubled pattern of brutality against children in Kenya. So in short, we are seeing a police, a country that is degenerating from a democratic policing to what we call, a police that doesn't respect the rule of law. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Nerima Wako. I'll speak to political violence. Activation of political goons to disrupt has taken root, and there has been near zero accountability from the government. The targets have mostly been anti-government critics. As we move towards the 2027 general election, there's a worrying trend of emerging political intolerance and the use of outlawed gangs. It happened in Limuru on March 20th when goons invaded a traders' meeting that aimed to stop excessive levies from the county government of Kiambu. It also happened during William Ruto's rallies in Nairobi in early March when Kenyans were robbed and attacked by armed gangs, and some individuals actually lost their lives. Former Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua has also had his meetings disrupted by hired goons. The same fate has befallen many political burial events nationwide. These trends highlight the systemic misuse of force and lack of accountability in law enforcement. The use of non-lethal weapons by security operators during protests, including tear gas, water cannons, and batons, has been enhanced. It remains unclear what guidelines the police use to acquire the said weapons and whether they are up to international standards. No law exists in Kenya, and there has been no attempt to regulate the use of these non-lethal weapons. Femicide and gender-based violence are spiraling out of control. Between January and March this year, 129 women were murdered. And according to the National Police Service and National Crime Research Center, which was released on April 9th, 2025, in 2024, 579 femicide deaths were recorded. That means more than 30 women die every single month, and that means every single day there's a woman being killed. This crisis is a state's failure to protect women and prosecute perpetrators. Law enforcement remains complicit, either through inaction, blaming victims, or outright collusion with abusers. Informal settlements and rural communities are especially vulnerable. The government has set up a task force to address femicide and GBV. Under both international law and Kenya's constitution, the state has a duty to prevent gender-based violence, protect victims, and investigate crimes, and hold perpetrators accountable. Yet the police frequently neglect or mishandle cases. Despite laws like the Sexual Offences Act and the Protection Against Domestic Violence Act, enforcement remains weak.
So thank you.
I'm Cornelius Odur, Kenya Human Rights Commission. I'll be reading a statement on broadly service delivery with a focus on education sector and health. The education sector is collapsing. Every tier of Kenya's education system, from ECD to universities, is under strain. Devolved functions of education are underfunded, understaffed, and ill-equipped. At the national level, basic education is plagued by curriculum confusion, deteriorating infrastructure, and chronic underfunding. TVETs and universities are especially hard hit, with outdated equipment and teaching technology, bloated debts, poor governance, and mismanagement of public universities due to state interference. The new university funding model has left students stranded and institutions unable to function effectively. Despite a court order declaring the new university funding model unconstitutional, the executive is hell-bent on implementing it. Despite CS for Education's political declaration, certificates withholding continues unabated. On health, the health service delivery has collapsed. The transition from NHIF to SHIF has been poorly managed. Private service providers are reluctant to transit to SHA because of huge pending bills owed to them and slow disbursement of arrears. Origa.
Good afternoon. My name is Warenga Wahome from Mathare Social Justice Center, and we will be listing about the question of housing. So the Kenyan government has failed to guarantee its citizens the right to housing, and while it's a constitutional state obligation to provide housing, the government has resorted to demolishing homes, leaving many homeless under the guise of affordable housing, a process which has continually been shrouded with secrecy and minimal public participation. For instance, the Business Laws Amendment Bill is at the public participation stage before the Senate. The bill, among others, seeks to amend Section 90 and Section 96 of the Land Act to reduce the time between default and foreclosure from 90 days to 45 days for beneficiaries of affordable housing, and also reasonably reduce the foreclosure notice from 40 days to 20 days, but only for affordable housing. Why does this matter? The intended beneficiaries are the poor. Some who have been given first right of purchase because they have vacated their shelters to pave way for affordable housing projects. The vulnerable folks should get more protection, not less protection from the law. Who is this so keen to see the poor lose their homes? Is someone with a predatory attitude waiting on their wings to dispossess those who have difficulties paying? Kenyans have until next week Tuesday to submit memoranda to the Senate opposing this amendment. There have been numerous judicial pronouncements that people should be given compensation and given alternative housing. However, people have been given eviction orders in the informal settlements of Nairobi and even in Mombasa, despite the fact that they do not have a place to stay. On land rights, despite heavy investments in digitization of land records, service delivery is still poor. According to the Commission of Administrative Justice, the Office of the Ombudsman, service delays at land registries across the country remain the most serious bottleneck, with some complaints taking years to resolve. While 263 cases were addressed within 3 years, 119 cases have been dragged on for 4 to 15 years. 8 cases actually took up to 25 years, and 2 cases remain unsolved for over 25 years. This continues to be a problem in the development of the social and economic and political rights of the people of Kenya.
Good afternoon. My name is Catherine Bui from Article 19. I will speak on freedom of association, assembly, and freedom of expression. Despite operationalization of the Public Benefits Organization Act in May 2024, the government is yet to adopt regulations that will facilitate its implementation. 13,000 organizations exist and they have 4 weeks to transition before the 13th of May 2025 deadline. Alarmingly, 2,800 PBOs were deregistered in a show of hostility to independent organizing. We also have concerns on legislative threats that continue to loom. The Assemblies and Demonstration Bill of 2024 is expected to pass in its regressive form. The Whistleblower Protection Bill still continues to stall. And the 2024 Computer Misuse and Cyber Amendments Bill threatens freedom of expression and extends unchecked state authority and surveillance over digital platforms. We also have the Public Participation Bill that is progressively slowly because of lack of allocation by the funding by the government. From mid last year, the government has also made direct attacks on media agencies, and law enforcement physically attacks journalists when they are doing their work and even damages their property. In 2025, the government has cancelled advertising in media stations that in any media stations that threatens their independence and criticizes the government. This is indirect attacks on the freedom of expression, freedom of press, and access to information for the general public. At the same time, constitutional commissions and oversight institutions are under siege. Budget cuts, politically motivated appointments, and delayed confirmations have crippled these bodies meant to safeguard democracies. Meanwhile, there is a systemic campaign to silence dissent. Whistleblowers and human rights defenders face threats, surveillance, and abductions. We ask for the government to do better. Thank you. Public finance.
So we'll go to the section on public finance accountability. We'll talk about corruption and also debt. My name is Sheila Masinde from Transparency International Kenya and the National Integrity Alliance. So corruption continues to strangle Kenya's future. Recent analysis described Kenya as exhibiting classic state capture, whereby a well-organized elite has repurposed the presidency and treasury into a temporary zone for personalized appropriation, subverting constitutional checks and operating outside public accountability. In infrastructure, the tripling of costs on the standard gauge railway and the absence of credible project audits reflect similar elite rent-seeking. Citizens have been treated to the discharge of persons either through acquittals aided by the prosecution or through arbitrary withdrawal of cases. So we found that people who have been accused of mega corruption in several instances, for example, the Aror Kimwarer Dam scandal, have been let go scot-free. This is coupled with allegations brought forward by the former Attorney General and the former Deputy President of loan contracts being proposed to be signed in airport corridors and dealings on housing, health, and digital public infrastructure, among others, being cut with oligarchs without due process. We are really concerned about corruption's persistent and deep-rooted nature across Kenya's public and private sectors. Despite repeated public commitments to accountability, corruption remains a significant barrier to the realization of social and economic rights like equitable development, effective service delivery, and public confidence in state institutions. Kenya's recent scores on the 2024 Corruption Perceptions Index, released by Transparency International, puts Kenya at 32 out of 100, and this illustrates a growing public frustration with slow and often ineffective prosecutions, particularly involving powerful individuals. Notably, there's a new age of corruption packaged as public-private partnership deals, manifested through, among other deals. We saw it in the Aror Kimwarer Dam case, the recent Adani deal that was aborted involving both the JKIA and Ketraco. These trends continue to erode the rule of law, accountability, and credibility of oversight institutions, with Parliament and the Executive disregarding reports from the constitutional institutions that are the last line of defense for public accountability. That said, we, however, acknowledge recent progress, including high-profile convictions of the former Kiambu governor for procurement-related bribery and his Nyandarua counterpart for violating procurement laws. These convictions signal a judiciary which is more willing to confront impunity, but however, we remain concerned about the High Court's decision to suspend the prosecution of the Thika Chief Magistrate despite the corruption investigations by EACC, and proposed charges by the Office of the Director of Public Prosecution. We commend the Auditor General for uncovering irregularities in the in the SHIF procurement of the digital health system. We also welcome proposals under the Anti-Corruption Laws Amendment Bill 2025 to fast-track resolution of cases and the streamlining of appeals, and we call for the speedy enactment of these proposals. And we further acknowledge the recent High Court ruling striking down the National Government Constituencies Development Fund, that's the NGCDF, as unconstitutional, further exposing the chronic misuse of resources intended for education and local development.
My name is Kawive. I'm from Inuka, Kenya, Nisisi, a member of NIA and Okwa Uchumi Coalition. I will take us through the question of public debt. That there is a rising fiscal deficit, bloated top government, and burden on workers. The 2025-2026 budget policy statement projects a fiscal deficit of 4.3% of the GDP, down from 4.9% in 2024-2025. This is to be financed by net external borrowing of 146.8 billion and net domestic borrowing of 604.2 billion. Yet public revenue projections hinge on reimposing taxes scrapped amid last year's protests, including levies on basic commodities and a compulsory 3% wage deduction matched by employers for a housing fund. Measures that hit the working class hardest and further squeeze already overstretched civil servants' households. Surprisingly, as the fiscal space constricts, the executive continues to expand by creating additional state departments headed by principal secretaries to create space for the so-called broad-based government and reneging on the commitment of June and July 2024 to reduce on advisors. There is also the question of costly domestic borrowing and crowding out of local borrowers. In the financial year 2023-2024, domestic borrowing rose to 704.7 billion, which is 82% of the year's total financial needs. And this was up from 471.4 billion the previous year. This effectively locked out private sector credit and crowded out productive investment. Investors now demand double-digit yields, peaking at 18% on short-term paper-making domestic debt, making domestic debt the single most expensive component of Kenya's financing. Such expensive and marked borrowing lacks project linkages and accountability, further undermining economic growth. Despite its concessional rates and governance disciplining conditionalities, Kenya has left its IMF extended fund facility in the final review, opting for higher cost domestic and commercial loans instead. While conditionalities require reforms, they also impose fiscal discipline that Kenya's borrowing strategy sorely needs. This puts Kenya's overall credit standing and chance of accessing World Bank financing at risk. Then the other issue related to this are what we call dangerous legislative amendments. Parliament is considering deleting the requirement that the Cabinet Secretary explain any breach of the 55% of GDP debt anchor, effectively waiving accountability for excessive borrowing. Simultaneously, legislators are pushing a constitutional amendment bill to entrench NGCDF and 2 new national funds to constitutional office and elected leaders in the Constitution, despite clear judicial findings that the NGCDF Act is unconstitutional and should be expunged. These moves will lock in unaccountable spending and undermine fiscal discipline and devolution.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is John Owegi with the Civic Freedoms Forum. Allow me to summarize our demands and our call to action along the 5 thematic areas that have been presented to you. I'll start with civic and fiscal space. We demand that all taxes of on essential goods and services such as food, medicine, educational materials, and electricity be removed to reduce the cost of living and uphold the right to life and dignity. Of course, in that line, we also demand that all the punitive taxes introduced under the Ruto regime, including the housing levy, amongst others, be repealed. On the issue around enforced disappearances and police killings, including abductions, we demand that there be established an impartial investigation on all of those cases, and those found culpable be held personally accountable for the crimes. We also call for immediate cease of politicization of security agencies and disband the elite police units that are involved in unlawful operations, including the unlawful operations such as abductions and illegal disappearances. We also call for immediate end by the government to continue the continued intimidation, surveillance, and criminalization of HRDs, human rights defenders, and independent media, as well as abolishment of efforts to criminalize any dissent voices, including those included in some of the repressive bills that have been mentioned, such as the Computer Misuse and Cybercrimes Amendment Bill of 2025. We call for the executive to stop interference with constitutional and independent officers, such as the Office of the Auditor General, Control of Budget, and the EACC. We also call Parliament and the executive again to protect tenure of office of all those independent officers. Parliament must withdraw the repressive bills, including the Assemblies and Demonstration Bill and the Computer Misuse and Cybercrimes Amendment Bill. Government must ensure that there is independent investigation into cross-border abductions of refugees and political and foreign activists. We also call upon Safaricom to uphold accountable, to be held accountable for illegal sharing of customers' data with law enforcement officers in operations that may have led to enforced disappearances, extrajudicial killings, and renditions. Some of the legislations have been stalling because of lack of government commitment, and therefore we call for fast tracking of such legislations, including harmonization and adoption of the PBO regulations before May 13th, which is the deadline for transition of NGOs to PBOs. On matters femicide and gender-based violence, we want to say that femicide must be included in distinct
offense, as a distinct offense under the Penal Code to ensure legal clarity and strengthen judicial response to gender-based killings. We also call upon government to dedicate funds to be allocated for forensic investigations and training on preservation of evidence for police officers, as well as a dedicated prosecutorial unit for GBV to be created to fast-track such cases. The National Police Service must also publish regular femicide cases, including statistics on reports, investigations, arrests, and convictions, to promote accountability and transparency on femicide and gender-based killings. Finally, on that matter, the government must provide trauma and counseling services at every police station for GBV survivors. This must also include mental health support to law enforcement officers who face secondary trauma from handling such cases. On corruption, we want to call upon the Office of the Auditor General to conduct timely, independent audits of all government programs, but particularly the high-risk initiatives such as affordable housing project, SHIF, and Boma's expansion through public-private partnerships. The state must fully fund and protect independent institutions such as the ACC and the Office of the DPP, as well as the judiciary. Parliament must now also fast-track the passing of the Whistleblower Protection Bill of 2023 to guarantee safety and confidentiality of reporting to avoid those whistleblowing from being exposed. Chapter 6 of the Constitution must be rigorously applied to vet public officials and political aspirants for integrity, particularly regarding wealth declarations. Access to Information Act of 2016 must now be fully enforced across all levels of government, particularly at the county level. Finally, on matters education, we call upon the government to establish a comprehensive national education support fund to ensure that no child is left behind, especially those from low-income families and marginalized communities. The government must also invest in continuous professional development for teachers, set and enforce national quality standards across all levels of education, and standardize school infrastructure and upgrade learning environment nationwide. Teachers Service Commission must retain its constitutional functions without political interference. State House and members of Parliament must cease the illegal issuance of appointment and promotional letters to teachers, which undermines and destabilizes the sector. All educational policies and practices must align with the national values and constitutional rights, including free and compulsory basic education for every child and access to education and training for everyone. This has been signed by Civic Freedoms Forum, Elimu Bora Working Group, National Integrity Alliance, Police Reforms Working Group, Social Justice Centers Working Group, Nairobi Chapter, Okoa Uchumi Campaign, Independent Medical Legal Unit, Kenya Human Rights Commission, Muungano wa Jane zote, Transparency International, Kenya, Usalama Forum, Article 19 East Africa, Inuka Kenya ni sisi, the Institute for Social Accountability, Mathare Social Justice Center. Oh yeah, and Mathare Social Justice Center. That's it. Thank you so much. We will now welcome questions, which will be answered by anyone.
Oh, okay. Yeah, as one of our colleagues said, when Kenyans were asked, are you happy with this government? Was it 60% who said they're not happy? Yeah. Sorry? Sorry, 87, sorry. 87 said they're not happy with this government. So as civil society organizations, we cannot disagree with what Kenyans have said. So I think you have your rating.
83%.
Yeah, 83%, yeah. Yes. So, so only 17% are happy, and they are not here. So we invite you to ask us questions. We've given you a panoramic view of the state of the nation, and this is based on what we do, the research we do, and the feedback we also get from the citizens we interact with. And we do this as also our responsibility to the public, giving them information and also holding the government accountable for what it has not done. So please ask us any question, your name, the media house you represent. Okay. On the CDF question, my colleague Kawive. Take on road-based government.
We get more questions.
Okay. Okay, so can we take 3 more and then we respond to all? Yeah. Nerima? The last person, last question before we respond. Okay, we'll take those ones.
Okay, thank you very much. Like I said, I'm Kawive Wambua from Inuka, Kenya, Nisisi. The question of NGCDF, if you remember, initially it was called CDF. Then when county governments were established, the MPs called it NGCDF. And you know that the work of the executive arm of government is to implement and do projects. The work of the judiciary is to adjudicate cases, and the work of parliament is to make laws and oversight the government. Now, TISA, the Institute of Social Accountability, SEDGG, and other institutions went to court in 2011 to say you cannot be oversighting the government when you are implementing projects, a CDF. The projects that are being done under CDF allegedly, like giving bursaries, building roads and all that, are executive functions. And the court ruled that CDF was unconstitutional. Parliamentarians went to the House and changed the law to make themselves patrons of CDF. But basically we know they have their hands in the till. So the institutions actually went to court again, and even up to the Supreme Court. And the NGCDF Act and even the process has been declared unconstitutional. The reason is very simple. You cannot oversee and work. Straightforward. Now this confusion of the NCDF is parliamentarians wanting to have access to money and therefore say this is what I have done in terms of development. That is not their work. And therefore, I think there should be a way of Kenyans preventing MPs, because now I hear they are going to change the law again to entrench it we said in the second, to entrench it in the constitution. You cannot have a constitutional nullity entrenched into the constitution. And the ruling by the Supreme Court is what every Kenyan must uphold. Money, there are avenues of getting money to people and to villages. The county governments exist. The county governments have got the leeway to devolve up to the lowest possible unit, including the village. So the facade that MPs bring development should be fought with everything that we are. Thank you.
Yeah. The formation of the broad-based government and the implications to democratic space is quite unfortunate because we have a situation whereby we have the opposition in the government and also the opposition in denial, because the opposition is clearly in the government. As you have also seen the latest event where Mr. Odiga and Mr. Ruto have had joint engagements. So what does that do to democratic space? So it reduces the capacity of the National Assembly and also Senate to oversight the government. And that also means then the other independent institutions ends up being overwhelmed. So this is also part of the bigger strategy of capturing institutions and also undermining democracy. Right now, actually, we have a situation whereby the regime almost has a license to commit abuses and violations with impunity, because the institutions which is responsible for the oversight, and you have heard the evidence about the issues we are talking about here, atrocities, the police excesses, Parliament has no say, public finance theft. The oversight is about to be at the National Assembly. So although this is supposed to be part of the plan towards winning the 2027 elections, it's also a scheme to cushion the government against accountability for the time being. And therefore, all of us now, the ones who are not part of the government, but we also play a civic oversight role, the civil society and the media and the religious groups. Actually, we end up overworked, because part of the work currently now we are doing now, like now the work we are doing right now, all of us, is about to be part of the duty of the National Assembly. So I think this bread-based regime is just part of the impunity we experience right now, and we must find ways of also challenging this kind of governance. So it's quite unfortunate, but we have also to raise to the occasion that now this is now the mandate we have been given as media and also as civil society. Thank you. Arima?
Our work as civil society is to highlight the challenges that citizens are going through. We are representative of citizens of this country, and there are institutions that exist that should be giving us the answers as to who is responsible. It is a concern to us when this political violence is occurring. We do not see the presence of police, yet there's supposed to be security in a lot of these events. We have not seen any reports on the individuals involved, and some cases occurring even almost a year from today. Kenyans do need to continue to ask for answers, and we need these institutions to give us the answers and to hold the individuals involved accountable. The country is too politically charged for a country that is to go through an election in 2027. The fact that we're already seeing public rallies and political events causing harm and violence toward the public, the ones who suffer the most end up being young people, even children and women as well. So it is our work today to highlight that we would like answers of those who are responsible and responses from the institutions responsible to give us those answers so that those individuals are held accountable. Thank you.
Okay, she wants to say something.
Another round of questions? We're good. Okay.
Wangesh wanted to add something.
Good afternoon, and just to respond to that question around, hired goons and hooligans who mess up with peaceful protests, I think it is in the public domain, and we did witness during the period June to September when we had the Gen Z-led protests, and we did witness them openly declaring that they are peaceful. And we know what happened after that. We did witness medics offering medical services to persons who had been injured, and they were attacked in the process of those injuries. In the process of offering services. Now, let me just speak to something that happened about 3 weeks ago when the president was in one of the visits in some part of Eastlands, and we know of the people who barricaded Thika Road and actually harassed motorists and pedestrians. Now, the question is, where were security forces at that point to protect the innocent persons who are injured? And we have evidence of lots of people who are injured. So they were in vehicles moving on a road, So you can't say that those who are attacked that they caused the harm on themselves. And so this is a kind of irresponsible, leadership that we are talking about, and asking that people play their rightful roles. We all have moral and constitutional obligations to hold our government to account, and that is what we are doing today. And so we are urging very, very seriously that we uphold the rule of law, and that we safeguard our constitution. We must have Kenyans of all ages, walks of life protected from all forms of harm and of violence. Thank you.
Okay. So just to thank you for...
I think last week, and we did speak to this on Friday, but I'm happy to speak to it again. We are happy, all of us, to speak to it. What we saw and witnessed last week was really very sad. It was a dark day for Kenyans. How do you tear gas your own children? How do you do that, and why are you tear gassing them? So the principle of the right to expression, which is provided for in our very own constitution. Now, the court had ruled that these children should perform the play. So in the first place, they were protected by the very law that we uphold. So there was absolutely no basis. And if anything, if there was a right or a basis even to stop it, there would have been other means. Why use tear gas? Literally, on young children. We did speak to the effects of some of these things. And what are we telling our generations? That really throw away the constitution and do as you please, abuse of power, police excessives, There has to be a no, and there has to be a choice to do that which is right for this country. We did say, and we stand by that all the officers who are involved in that act, there should be serious, thorough investigations, and they must be held culpable. There needs to be, we actually call for their suspension. Whoever was involved in that act should be suspended, then independent investigations and prosecution. Those are some of the immediate recommendations that we are making in regards to the Nakuru issue that affected our girls. And just to say, we really want to celebrate Butere girls.
Oh, yes.
We stand in solidarity with Butere girls. We celebrate them for standing in and fighting for their rights.
Boss.